With 1 month gone from the 2022 season and the Ravens sitting at 2-2, who are some of the studs and duds so far through week 4? We talk about that and more with a very special guest next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Ravens podcast, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in, making Locked On Ravens your first listen here of the day. If you're available on all platforms, that includes over on YouTube in video format. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your jobs for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. We are back here. The Ravens are 2-2, falling to Buffalo 23-20 in week 4, but there is still some optimism for this team. Definitely only a month down, and we're going to be talking about some of those studs and duds from this team so far. Here to do it with me is IngravenVids, and Ingraven, I'm excited to have you back on the show. I wish we were talking after a win, but even so, 2-2 is still an okay place to be in right now.
Yeah, it's not the best, but it's definitely not the worst. Like, we would much rather be having this conversation after being 4-0, but we would much least be having this conversation after being 0-4. So Ravens are right there in the middle. They certainly have some things that they got to fix, that they got to work on. They got some things that they've been doing good. They got some things that they have been doing not so good. Got some things that have crept up from their past that they continue to do. But hopefully they'll learn from their mistakes, hopefully.
Yeah, and it's big because the perception that, hey, you know what, if we were sitting here at 2-2, if we had talked about that before the year, you would have said, okay, yeah, there are some good teams. You know, the Dolphins are good. The Patriots are good. I just think it's how it happened with the 21-point lead blown to Miami. You have the 17-point lead to Buffalo. The offense can't score in the second half. So it's those things where they are so close to being 4-0 or even 3-1, where you're sitting at 2-2 and you're like, man, that's kind of disappointing a little bit based off where they were in those games. So, Ingraven, I do want to ask you first about the Buffalo game, 23-20, in a game where, look, fast start, the Ravens gave you one with Marlon Humphrey interception, J.K. Dobbins touchdown. But after that, the Bills score right before the first half, and then the armor starts to peel off over the course of the rest of the game. The offense can't score again. John Harbaugh's decision, though, was one that I think looms large for a lot of people, where he takes the fourth down try over the field goal in a tie game with 4 minutes left. And so I wanted to get your thoughts there, Ingraven, because I know there are a lot of people who would have taken the field goal. There are a lot of people who would have gone for it. Where are you on that spectrum?
You know, it's crazy. When I was watching the game live, I was like 50-50 on it. I was like, okay, they go for it, cool. If they take the points, cool. And my guy, Lenny, had texted me. And he was like, why are they not taking the points? And I was like, what you mean? I mean, I could understand what they're going for. But he was like, no, you got to take the points every time in that one because it's late in the fourth quarter. You got to think situationally. It's late in the fourth quarter. You score a field goal. You go up by 3. So Bills, say, for instance, they go down the field and they kick a field goal. They can't beat you like that because it's a tie game at that point. They can only beat you with a touchdown. And then with if they score a touchdown, then they're not going to be – if they're driving down the field, they're going to be trying to score a touchdown, but they're not going to be doing it in this timely way where they're trying to take down all the clock and whatnot because, no, that could come back to bite them. So worst case scenario, they score a touchdown, there could be time left. But you take the field goal so you can be up and you can put it in your defense's hands at that point. And the defense, this game, they had actually been pretty good overall because they, like, while the pass rush was still – it was rough. It was ugly. And then there was some very questionable calls that happened throughout. The defense, they did their thing against, I think it's the number one, Bills were the number one offense, I believe. And they were certainly number one passing offense. And defense held Josh Allen down. So it would have been a smarter idea to take your points in that situation because the points just guarantees, again, that you get points and that you're in the lead. And it just puts your team in a much better situation. So they should have taken the points there. But you know what? With the actual play design, with them going for it, it was set up really nice. It was a beautiful play design. It was set up to get Duvernay open, and he did do just that. He got wide open. But then the offensive line, they started caving in. Lamar, then he started backpedaling, and it ended up being a disaster. Then he threw the ball late, so it just ended up being a disaster. So hopefully, I would have thought that, like, especially with last year, with all the 2-point conversions and whatnot, and them not taking the points, and even this year too, there've been scenarios this year where they haven't taken the points, like in the Dolphins game. Scenarios like that, they will. I feel like that would make you like, okay, you know what? And next time we get in this situation, we're going to take our points, because the Ravens have continued to lose these games where they just don't take the points that are right there. And then what makes it worse is that they end up losing these games by like 3, 2, 6. They end up losing these games by 1-score games. And then you think back like, man, maybe we should have kicked that field goal at that point. But by then it's too late.
Right. I'm of that mindset too, Engraven. I think that Baltimore probably should have taken the points there. I didn't expect it. I was writing an article, and because I thought, all right, it's 4th down, they're gonna take the points, and that'll be that. And I hear, oh, Lamar Jackson comes on the field, and I'm like, hold on, hold on a second. So look, it's situational. Even going back to the 2-point conversions, like, I understood those decisions in terms of like, oh, they're going for the win, they're being aggressive. I get it. And this is another one of those aggressive situations. But I think against the Buffalo team that, look, you're right, the defense, all things considered, played holding the Bills to 23 points and 20 up until the game-winning field goal is pretty good overall when you're considering the Ravens coming in with a little bit of a leaky defense to week 4 and the fact that they're able to do that. So I think that the points would have helped you there, and you're still trusting your defense in that situation by saying, hey, go out there, protect this 3-point lead for us and see what happens. And this was like the worst case scenario, because John Harbaugh talked a bit about how, hey, you know what, it's either we score 7 or the ball's at the 2. Well, there's an interception in the end zone, which is a touchback. So you could even argue that a pick 6 would have been better in that situation, because it will at least give the offense a chance to go back and try to win the game, because the Bills end up going down the field and taking all that away. So there are arguments to be made on either side. But I think, Engraven, when you're talking about the offense, we've talked about Lamar Jackson a lot, and rightfully so. He's still, I think, even despite the Buffalo game in the MVP conversation, this was not his finest game overall. But I think that when you talk about these wet, rainy games, I've talked about this, you go back to like the 2019 San Francisco game where that was super sloppy, and in that game, Lamar Jackson just didn't feel like himself in that one. And he's talked a bit about the weather too, but how much of an impact do you think the weather had on Lamar Jackson's performance? Because we saw balls slipping through guys' hands, we saw fumbles, Devin Singletary had one. So how much do you think the weather really did impact this football game?
I think it did impact his performance a bit, but more so the performance of guys around him, more so with Rashad Bateman, because that, especially like in the second half, there were just opportunities that were missed. There was one ball where Rashad Bateman sort of slipped, and there was an incompletion, and then there was the 3rd down where Rashad Bateman ran his inside slant. It was wide open. He was set up to get a bunch of yak. Lamar put it on the money, and he just dropped it. He dropped it, and that ended another drive in the second half to contribute to them continuing not to score points in the second half. But so with Lamar, I didn't really see him impacted too much by all the rain, but I did see, again, a couple of the guys around him be impacted by those wet conditions. And I think really, too, maybe even the game plan a little bit, too, be impacted by those wet conditions.
Right. I know that there's been a lot made of the play calling so far, both on offense and on defense, in terms of just how the coordinators have been performing this year. And defensively, Engraven, you did talk about it. Like the 23 points the Ravens gave up to the Bills, some people were expecting this to be a 34-point Bills score or 30-point. Well, they were able to do it, and they were able to start fast. The secondary, I know right now they are 31st in net yards per attempt, so obviously you want to get that stat a bit better. But it feels like they might be starting to put it together a little bit. We'll talk about Marlon Humphrey a bit in the 3rd segment, but I thought Marlon Humphrey played a great game in this one. I thought you did have moments, but you do go back to the pass rush where we saw the week 1 performance against the Jets. It was dominant. Guys were getting to Joe Flacco, and obviously the Bills are not the Jets. The Patriots not the Jets, Dolphins not the Jets. But at the same time, I think you just want a bit more consistency out of that. And I think if the Ravens are able to get just a bit more pressure, the game could have gone differently.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That would have changed everything. If Ravens could actually get pressure consistent pressure on the quarterback. It's funny because last week against the Patriots, the Ravens pass rush, it was up and down. But when it was up, when it was doing good, that's when the interceptions came through. So I don't think that's a coincidence. So with Josh Allen, like we knew going into the game, they couldn't get a pass rush against Tua. He looked like Marino. They couldn't get a pass rush a lot of times against Mac Jones. Sometimes he was looking like Brady. And with this game, Josh Allen, they knew going into this game, you got to get a pass rush against Josh Allen because he is much better than those other two guys that they faced. But they just weren't able to get it. And what's crazy when you think about this game is that even with them not being able to get a consistent pass rush against Josh Allen, they still held them to 20 points until the game-winning field goal. So they were still able to hold them down. Stephon Diggs, I was expecting him to go off like crazy. Nope. I think he had like 4 catches for 67 yards, something like that. Gabe, nope. Knox, nope. Nobody. The Bills' offense was not going off like I expected it to. And the Ravens did that without a pass rush. So I could and you could be right. Maybe they are starting to click a little bit. And that would be a good sign. I mean, yeah, you go against an offense like that and you hold them down. That's a great sign. So hopefully that continues this week because now you're going up against some really pretty good receivers. Some pretty good receivers. And then a familiar face with Hayden Hurst. You're going up against a really good offense. But let me stop jumping ahead to the Bengals because we're still talking about the Bills.
Yeah, and it is crazy because I will say, and I've been saying this for a while, I think the return of Tyus Bowser is going to solve a lot of their issues. I just think what he brings, he showed it last year, where I think he was the most consistent defender on that defense last year. He led the team in sacks. He also does a lot in terms of coverage. Playing that Sam position is not easy. And I think Tyus Bowser does that very well. And obviously there are questions. Will Tyus Bowser be Tyus Bowser coming back from that Achilles injury? You got to get the ramp up period going. But Ingraven, we saw some flashes from Odafe Owe in this game. We saw him get a sack, a forced fumble, almost a second forced fumble at the end of that game where the ball moves. It moved, and that's like the cherry on top of this whole thing. Man. So the pass rush is huge. Hopefully Justin Houston's able to come back. Maybe you get back David Ojabo at some point this year. So they have the talent. They just have to put it together, but it has to be better. They have to get more consistent pressure. And you're right, Ingraven, it's something we've been talking about for years now. It's not just a this year thing. We've been going back a little while talking about this. But coming up in our second segment, we'll be diving into some studs and duds from the offensive side of the ball through 4 weeks for this Ravens team. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small businesses fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. I've used LinkedIn for a ton of things over the course of my life. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. They have simple tools you can use like screening questions to make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and who you'd like to hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. As you know, every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Olshaker still here with IngravenVids. And Ingraven, when you're talking about studs and duds, well, actually, when you're talking about studs, first of all, you cannot have this conversation without talking about Lamar Jackson. It's someone who, as I said, through in the MVP conversation right now, and even though that Buffalo game was not ideal, was not his best performance, he's still somebody who we have seen play with confidence, play with poise. He's pushing the ball down the field, getting everybody involved. He's someone who, at least in my opinion, I have to put is an absolute stud.
Oh yeah, for sure. Lamar Jackson, he's been doing his thing, and he has continued to show just how valuable he is to these Baltimore Ravens. Like he has been the majority of the Ravens' run game for these first 4 games, and obviously him being their quarterback, he's been doing his thing there too, and getting different people involved. As far as like a Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, obviously Mark Andrews, he's been doing this thing there. So we didn't expect that to change But yeah, Lamar has certainly continued to remain in the MVP race. One bad game does not change that because, and usually with Lamar Jackson, for every one bad game that he has, then he'll have like 3 or 4 really good ones. So this game was bad. It was rough. It was ugly. Especially those 2 interceptions. But that's not a normal Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, you got to put him in the stud category here for sure. And I'm gonna throw a name out here, Engraven. I want to get your reaction because an unheralded stud and someone who unfortunately got injured in Buffalo on Sunday. That's Justice Hill. Hill has impressed me to the max. He has been Baltimore's best running back so far this season, outplaying guys like the veterans, Kenyon Drake, Mike Davis, and obviously J.K. Dobbins is working his way back. But Hill has shown explosiveness, burst, and obviously you hope he's okay and is able to get back on the field because I think he has been so good this year and a stud in my opinion.
Oh yeah. Justice Hill, he's been nice. He's been nice. That's why this it's tough, man, with the timing. I mean, any injury is tough. But with the timing of this injury, it's really tough. He was somebody that I really didn't even expect to make the regular roster this year. I expected him to be on the practice squad at most, but the Ravens kept him around, and it's shown to be a good decision. Because especially when they drafted Tyler Beatty, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe this might be the end of Justice Hill on an active roster, but they kept him around and it's paid off. That's why, yeah, that injury was it was bad, man, especially because a lot of people don't talk about him when it comes to the Ravens running backs returning from injuries, because everybody, of course, will name it with J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, which we understand why. But a lot of people forget that Justice Hill, he went out with an injury too, that he suffered during practice one day. And he made his way back and he was ready week 1. He was ready from jump. So that says a lot about just him as a competitor and him, just his fight to get back and to be good when he was back. But so yeah, that's a big blow because he was playing really good.
Yeah, and obviously I mentioned those veterans, the duds from that group, in my opinion, are definitely Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake. I just expected more from them. And honestly, the vets last year outplayed him. Latavius Murray, Devonta Freeman, those guys had better performances. And I know it's different offenses, different years, etc. But I just wish they would have been able to carry more of the load while J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards were able to come back. But credit to Justice Hill. And I know, Engraven, talking about this receiver group, a lot of questions heading into the year about could they step up with Marquise Brown? Who's going to replace the deep speed, et cetera, et cetera? Well, you have seen both Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay flourish. I know there have been a bit of growing pains with Rashad Bateman in terms of some of the drops we've seen here and there, but he has shown big playability, some route running. And Devin Duvernay, I mean, you talk about another unheralded stud, someone who's popped up and been amazing. I think he is another guy who you just have to put in that category.
Yeah, with Devin Duvernay, he's really surprised me like crazy. He doesn't get many opportunities, but when he does get an opportunity, he always makes the most of it. He doesn't drop his for sure hands, and I mean it's been that way since college, and that's why I think that's why the Ravens drafted him because after that 2019 playoffs, when they saw those drops, they were like, hold up, we got to get some receivers that can catch. So they drafted Duvernay and Prochet, but with Duvernay, he's just, I didn't even think that the Ravens would view him as a wide receiver, just based off of how they used him over the past couple of years. I did not see them using him like a wide receiver. I thought he was just going to continue to be a gadget guy. And I was really expecting Prochet to be that number 2 guy. But the Ravens, they've shown that they still use him as a gadget here and there because they still have ran some of those jet sweeps. But the fact that he's been getting involved a lot as a wide receiver, and been making some plays that just speaks volumes to him, to his patience too, and just his work ethic, just to show hey, I'm still here. The first 2 years they weren't the best, they weren't the worst, but they weren't the best. But let me make the most of my opportunity now with Hollywood being gone. Let me really try to step up and try to shine.
Right, and I think both those guys, you have the 1-2 punch of Bateman and Duvernay. It has been good for them overall. I do want to see them continue to ascend, continue to get better. But I've been impressed with both those guys so far. Although Bateman, I know with the drops, some people are saying, you gotta get those out right now in terms of just getting them out in September instead of having them happen in December, January. But Engraven, it's interesting because with the wide receivers like Bateman and Duvernay, Were you expecting more from guys like James Prochet, who had the injury, obviously, guys like Tylen Wallace? Would you classify them as duds, or they just haven't had enough playing time to really do anything for you right now?
Yeah, I think we can't say it because they haven't had much playing time on many opportunities either. Um, they don't really get many snaps like that, and I know Tylen Wallace. He was targeted once that I remember this whole season so far, and that was on an interception in the Jets game. Uh, and then with James Prochet, I don't think he's been targeted at all. And I know he did miss the second and third game with a groin injury, but he was back for this last game. But he hasn't been out there at all. So I think it's too early to really put any label on them because we just simply haven't seen them like really at all.
Right. And I know when you're talking about guys who have had some snaps, have had some opportunities, Josh Oliver's been out there for a while. He's been
Yeah.
taking on that role. Nick Boyle, we haven't really seen a ton of Nick Boyle this year for whatever the reason is. I know
Yeah.
there have been questions and haven't really gotten a ton of answers. So that
Mm-hmm.
situation is one to monitor. But Isaiah Likely Ingraven is an interesting one because the preseason that he had, everybody was thinking, man, this 1-2 punch with Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, defenses can't defend it. But Likely hasn't really done a lot so far. You haven't really seen it. I mean, I think that based off the expectations, not that he's not talented, I might put him in the dud category here.
So far, yeah, it's been rough. There have been drops. There's like even in the game, and like if we as fans, if we see it, we would expect like that coaches would definitely see it too. Like there was one play in the Bills game where I think it was J.K. Dobbins, and he was running to the left. Whether it's J.K. Dobbins or Justice Hill, whoever it was, the running back was running to the left side of the offensive line, and Isaiah Likely, he was out there, and he was supposed to block, but he was turning around, just looking back to see what was going on with the play, and it just looked really bad. And that's an easy way to find yourself in the doghouse. But I don't think he's there yet. But I just we're waiting on him. We're waiting on him to make something happen. Waiting on him to just make some of those plays that we saw in the preseason. We know this is not preseason. Teams are playing you differently. Defenses are playing you differently. But they gotta get him going, especially because we don't know how long he'll be out yet for. But with Rashad Bateman, if that foot injury, if that injury is something serious and he's out for a week or 2 weeks or however long it could be, Ravens gonna need somebody else to step up. A lot of pressure is going to be on Duvernay, obviously Mark Andrews, but they're going to need as many people as they possibly can to step up and try to show out in Rashad Bateman's absence. Again, hopefully he doesn't have an absence, but I think that he will. But they're going to need more, and Isaiah Likely could be a prime candidate to give them more. Since the Ravens, they obviously love him. They've shown how much they love him from jump. And they do have him out there a significant amount of time and snaps and whatnot. So it's important that when he does get his chances, that he makes the most of them, whether that's catching the ball or even if it's blocking somebody and finding somebody to block if it's a run play. He's got to make the most of everything that's handed to him.
And speaking of stepping up, Ingraven, I think Daniel Faalele has been someone who has answered the bell when it comes to stepping up. Someone who, the door at left tackle as it's been with Jawan James going down, Passion McCary going down, Ronnie Stanley still not back yet. Faalele comes in and never played left tackle in college, comes in and holds his own. And I think credit to the Ravens for being able to get him some help when he needs it. But I think that he has done a phenomenal job. And then on the other side of things, I think Morgan Moses has been average this year. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah,
It's not a good thing, but just kind of in the middle there. What are your thoughts on those two guys?
Oh yeah, Faalele, I was proud of him. I was proud of him. It almost seemed like the Bills, like they switched Von Miller to Morgan Moses' side. After and I think that's where he got his first sack. I believe it was on Morgan Moses. But yeah, with Faalele, for especially given the situation, you drafted as a right tackle. You've only played right tackle. Ravens have all these other guys in front of you who can play left tackle just in case Ronnie Stanley's not ready. Ronnie Stanley ends up not being ready. All right, Jawan James, boom, he's out. All right, Patrick McCary, boom, he's out. All right, well, I guess it's Faalele time. So he stepped in, and he's done all right so far. And especially when it it was quite a an analogy with Jawan James, because he was somebody also that had only played right tackle, and how he said it's going from right to left tackle. It's like wiping with a different hand. I said, okay, well that's one way to put it, but we get what you're saying. So with Falele, it's the same thing. So he's done a good job for especially given what the situation is.
Yeah, and other studs on that line, I think Ben Powers has played higher than expectations for him. I think Tyler Linderbaum has definitely had moments as well where he has shown that he can be the Ravens center for the next however long, 5-10 years potentially. Just getting those guys acclimated, getting the consistency on the offensive line is big. But coming up here in our final segment, we'll be diving into defensive studs and duds for the first 4 weeks of Baltimore. So don't go anywhere. We still have a ton to talk about on the show. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Bet Online. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. You can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check out all your favorite games and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to BetOnline.net or use mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allshaker still here with IngravenVids, talking about studs and duds for the Baltimore Ravens through 4 weeks of the 2022 season. 2-2 is the record so far. And Ingraven, I know that I kind of mentioned Odafe Oweh earlier. Did not have a strong start the first 3 weeks. Did definitely show up in week 4 against Buffalo. Where are you on him right now in terms of potentially stud or dud or even just a hold status for him?
Odafe Oweh, he's there. He's close. He's close. It's just a matter of finishing. I think he's up definitely like top 2 in NFL in pressures. So it's important that those pressures just turn into more QB hits and then of course more sacks. Just finishing the job. This past Sunday, he did a good job of finishing the job a couple of times, like you mentioned earlier, with that forced fumble on Singletary. Then almost the second one, even though I feel like right there, like I know in football you got to make these split second decisions, but I feel like right there, you just got to let them score, because if you fail on that, then, and I know you don't want to look at it like, oh man, what if I fail? But if you fail on that, then again it's game over, and that's what happened. He failed on that, and it was game over. But he did early in the game, the sack that he got on Josh Allen. It was nice. Initially, I remember watching it live. I called it an accidental sack. I thought that Josh Allen just ran into Odafe Oweh's arms and then he went down. But then I watched it again and I was like, hold up. No. That was actually really good effort from Odafe Oweh. Josh Allen, he got pressure from his left side and he was going to the right, but Odafe Oweh, he was getting taken down by the offensive lineman and he reached out, grabbed Josh Allen's ankles and took him down. So that was a really good play by him. But you just want to see just a little bit more from Odafe Oweh. And I know right now, I believe he is playing out of position. I think he's playing Tyus Bowser's position right now. So that could be a contributing factor in it too. But you just certainly want to see more from him. Now, this was a big risk taking him by the Ravens because he was extremely raw, very raw. Somebody who hadn't even played football just much throughout his lifetime. Before he ended up getting drafted by the Ravens. So I think they drafted him based off of his ability, obviously, his speed, his size, just a combination of both. And we're hoping like, all right, we can really turn him into a monster. So just a few things here and there that he could improve on. But I think Odafe Oweh is close. But we just want to see just a little bit more.
Right, that one play at the end of the game was like the backbreaker cherry on top. And I think Singletary was almost, it looked like he was starting to go down. You don't really know in the clip, but yeah, Owe said that, you're asked in the huddle, he said, to either go for the strip or let him score. And the whole Ravens defense was letting them score. And then you see Owe charging in that clip that Jonas Schaefer posted, Calais Campbell shared it as well, the ball moving. You're like, oh, they were so close to getting the ball back. So yeah, consistency is key, much like the rest of the front seven. And I know a stud for me, Justin Madubuike, someone who I think has played very well, batting balls left and right. Calais Campbell getting his hands on some as well. Justin Houston had a great start to the year before having to miss the Buffalo game in week 4. But Ingraven, one of the more controversial players for Ravens Twitter, I would say, in terms of just performance review, is Patrick Queen and where people are with Patrick Queen right now. Some people think everything's great. Other people think it is not so great when talking about Patrick Queen and his performance so far. We have seen the ups, we have seen the downs in Queen over his first couple years, but where are you on him through 4 weeks of his third season?
For Patrick Queen, I think his biggest struggle is just closing on big plays, because Patrick Queen, he'll be around the ball, he'll be around the play, but he'll just struggle sometimes when it comes to finishing. The ability is there, the talent is there, the potential is there. It's just a matter of it all coming out at the same time. And these are like game-changing plays that could have been made. Obviously, you go to the Bills game, there's that big drop pick, a huge drop pick. That same drive, they ended up getting a touchdown. I think that's where Isaiah McKenzie, he caught the touchdown pass from Josh Allen. Another drive, Josh Allen's getting pressure. Patrick Queen, he ends up sort of over pursuing him. Josh Allen runs and Queen can't catch him, and that was all she wrote from there. I think other than that, besides those two big plays, he actually didn't have a bad game. But then you go back to last week against the Patriots. The drop, not only the drop interception, but that's a drop pick six. Nobody's gonna catch Patrick Queen in that situation. But there was that play. Then they got the touchdown a couple plays later. But even there was some missed tackles in that game too. And again, it's just some missed opportunities, man. So if Patrick Queen, he just got to work on closing, work on finishing the job. Because again, he's always right there, but he doesn't finish. So once he can start finishing, then things can really take off for Patrick Queen in a positive way.
Right. Consistency is key, in finishing on those big plays is something that I think, again, we will be able to see him do. I'm hopeful still for Patrick Queen. Definitely. It's not over for Patrick Queen right now. It's still, we're only a month in. But I do think we have seen some positive flashes from him. You just want to see the finishing ability a bit more. I agree with you, definitely, Ingraven. But looking at the secondary, you have talent there. You have names. You have young players. I think Marlon Humphrey has played lights out this year. Absolutely lights out. Marcus Peters is starting to come into his own a little bit, be the Marcus Peters we are accustomed to seeing. Marcus Williams, worth every penny of that contract. What are your thoughts on the secondary and some studs and duds in that group?
With the secondary, Marlon Humphrey, he's been having an amazing season so far. You see his impact and how strong it is on this defense. Especially like I think the game where you saw it the most was in that Dolphins game, to when he wasn't on the field, and then the Dolphins, they just start racking up all of these points. Marcus Peters, he's been playing good overall as well, giving up a few here and there, but he's been playing pretty good overall. But yeah, Marcus Williams, you get what you pay for, and Ravens certainly got what they paid for Marcus Williams. Every single game, he's been around the ball. Every single game, if he doesn't catch a pick, then he dropped one. Because even having in this Bills game, he almost caught a pick, but he ended up dropping it. But he has made a lot of plays for this Ravens secondary and really giving them someone on the back end who, again, a playmaker. And they have been missing that for a while, just missing a playmaker in that secondary. So he's been pretty good. The younger cornerbacks, Brandon Stevens, I think he's been a little bit up and down. He's been up and down. Pepe Williams, he's been up and down too. Jalen Alma-Davis, probably more downs than ups. It's been a struggle for him these first couple of weeks. But he didn't have a preseason. He didn't play in a preseason at all. So I guess this is kind of like his own preseason. But I know offenses have picked on him quite a bit. And then in this last game against the Bills, he was inactive. So for the younger guys, they've struggled a bit here and there. Been some inconsistencies, but the veterans, they've been doing what they need to do. So now it's just a mix of not even meeting in the middle. I don't want them to meet in the middle, because that meeting in the middle would mean that the young guys, they step up, but the older guys, they step back and they step down. So no, don't meet in the middle. But It's a matter of getting the young guys sort of caught up. And not that we expect them to be these shutdown cornerbacks in their first year and whatnot. I mean, that would be great. We won't complain. But just really trying to get them up to speed, and then showing them where they can really improve on little things too. With Pepe Williams, one of the things that I saw from him is that he doesn't really get beat, but at the point of attack, when that ball gets there, that's when he just miss it by a little bit. With Brandon Stevens, with him, it's pretty much the same thing. He'll be right there, but sometimes he'll make the play now. But there'll be other times when he just won't. There was one play in particular. I think it was a back shoulder throw. It was Mac Jones in the Patriots game. He did a back shoulder throw to, I want to say it was Devontae Parker, but I don't remember who it was. But Brandon Stevens was all over him. He played great coverage, but the throw and catch were just perfect. They were perfect. So it was almost like nothing that he could do about it. But we've seen where he's made some great plays. I forget which game it was when somebody threw a deep pass on Brandon Stevens. He didn't even turn around, but he just raised his arms up at the perfect time and swatted it away. And then we've seen him give up some stuff too. So it's just a matter of just trying to get rid of the inconsistencies as much as you possibly can for the young cornerbacks. And the older cornerbacks continuing to play well.
Right. I mean, this is a talented secondary. They have obviously invested a ton of money, a ton of draft capital into that position. So you want to have them play at the highest level they can. And I think that they can continue to do that, just getting more acclimated. And again, we're only a month into the year. We still have so much football left, so much time left. I know sitting at 2-2, again, based off how it happened, is not the best feeling for a lot of people right now. But they still have, I think, a decently easy schedule from here on out. Cincinnati's going to be a tough game, a tough game for them on Sunday night, definitely. But they still have the opportunity. The North hasn't looked extremely impressive so far through the first month. The AFC, you have teams going through injury issues themselves. The Chargers are beat up right now. Other teams as well. I think Baltimore's still a good football team. They have a lot of talent. And through the first month, there are always these kind of grace periods of getting guys acclimated with each other, guys playing next to each other in a live NFL setting. So the Ravens have been right there in all the games they've played. They've won 2 of them. They've lost 2 of them. Not in the best fashion with the losses, but I still think that they can learn from these mistakes and get it going over the course of these next couple of months here. And I think by the time December rolls around, this will be a team that's in the thick of the playoff race in the AFC, the thick of the AFC North round race. Absolutely. But Ingraven, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for hopping on with me here. Please tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Hey, you can find me on YouTube, it's IngravenVids. This team keep it clean, so everybody welcome to come through. And we're working on just continuing to cover the Ravens. Any updates? We got daily updates, daily videos, a very interactive channel. So subscribers are a huge part of it. We have a segment on there called Questions from Subscribers, to where they can send in any question about really anything that's going on with the Ravens or just really anything in football in general. We'll talk about it on the channel. But I appreciate you having me on. Thank you for that, as always. And y'all be on the lookout because I got to bring Kevin on sometime real soon.
Hey, it's always a blast talking with you, Ingraven. I'll be looking forward to it. And of course, the links to Ingraven's work will be in the description below. So be sure to check his channel out, subscribe to the channel. One of the best in the business. Absolutely. But thank you again, Ingraven. I do appreciate it. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content, starting to preview that Cincinnati Bengals Week 5 matchup for Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.